John Carter stared out the viewport of the transport ship as the massive Galactic Council station came into view. The structure was unlike anything humans had ever built, a spinning wheel of metal and crystal that housed representatives from over 3,000 spacefaring civilizations. Lights twinkled across its surface like stars, and ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it in careful patterns. "First time at the Council, Ambassador?" asked the pilot, a green-skinned alien with 4 arms. "First time for any human," John replied. It had been only 6 months since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel, and the galaxy had suddenly opened up to them. John, a former Marine with diplomatic training, had been chosen as Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. The ship docked with a gentle bump. John grabbed his small bag and straightened, his dark blue suit. He had been briefed extensively, but nothing could have prepared him for the riot of colors, shapes, and sounds that greeted him as he stepped into the arrival hall. Beings of every description moved through the space, some floating, others crawling, many walking on various numbers of legs. A small, hovering drone approached him. "Ambassador Carter of Earth, I am Guide Unit 7. I will escort you to your quarters and then to the council chambers." John followed the drone through wide corridors. He noticed something odd as they walked. Despite the amazing diversity of life forms, there was a strange sameness to their behavior. Many kept their heads down. Conversations hushed when certain aliens passed by. There was tension in the air. "Guide Unit 7, how many species are currently represented on the council?" John asked. "Officially, 3,214 spacefaring civilizations have representation," the drone replied. "However, voting blocks are dominated by the 8 major powers, with the Draconian Empire holding the most influence." "And when will I meet these Draconians?" The drone's lights flickered. "King Zarketh will be presiding over today's general session. It is fortunate that your arrival coincides with his presence." The way the drone said "fortunate" made John think it meant exactly the opposite. After a quick stop at his quarters, a simple but comfortable room with a bed modified for human physiology, John was led to the council chambers. The room was enormous, a perfect circle with thousands of seating platforms arranged in rising tiers. A central platform hovered in the middle. Guide Unit 7 showed John to Earth's assigned seat, at the very back of the chamber, far from the center of power. "New species are always positioned in the outer ring," the drone explained, though John noticed many empty seats much closer to the front. As representatives filed in, John observed carefully. He had been trained to read body language in humans, but he was finding that certain behaviors seemed universal. Fear, for instance. Many representatives showed signs of anxiety, particularly when a group of large reptilian beings entered through a special door. "The Draconian delegation," whispered a voice beside John. He turned to see a slender humanoid with blue skin and silvery eyes taking the seat next to him. "I am Elia, representative of the Centauri Alliance. You must be the human we've heard about. John Carter from Earth, pleased to meet you. You chose an interesting time to join the galactic community, John from Earth." Before John could ask what she meant, a booming sound echoed through the chamber. The central platform was now occupied by the largest of the reptilian aliens, nearly 8 feet tall with iridescent black scales and a crown of bony spikes. He wore ornate armor that gleamed under the lights. "King Zarketh," Ilya said quietly, "ruler of the Draconian Empire, which spans hundreds of worlds, and unofficial ruler of this council, though no one says that publicly." John watched as Zarketh began speaking, his voice deep and commanding. The king moved with the confident grace of someone who never questioned his own authority. The chamber fell completely silent when he spoke. The session proceeded with various matters being brought forward, debated briefly, and then decided, invariably as Zarketh wished. John noticed that few representatives spoke up, and those who did seemed careful with their words, often beginning with extensive praise for the Draconians. Finally, Earth's application for technology sharing agreements came up on the agenda. John stood as instructed and moved to a small platform that brought him forward, though still far from the central position where Zarketh loomed. "So, the king said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. The primitive monkeys from the backwater planet wish to access council technology. How ambitious. Chuckles rippled through certain sections of the chamber. John maintained his composure. Earth respectfully requests consideration for Level 2 technology exchange, as per Section 5 of the Galactic Cooperation Treaty. We offer our own advances in renewable energy and medical research in return. Zarketh made a dismissive gesture with clawed hands. Your species only achieved FTL travel this year, using principles developed by others millennia ago. What could you possibly offer that would interest advanced civilizations? Our different path of development has led to unique solutions, John replied evenly. Our medical techniques for neural regeneration, for example, are crude and inefficient, the king interrupted. I've reviewed your submission. Request denied. He looked around the chamber. Does anyone wish to sponsor the humans for reconsideration? Silence filled the room. Not a single representative moved. As I thought, Zarketh said. Ambassador Carter, you should be grateful your species is even permitted in this chamber. Many civilizations wait centuries for such an honor. Throughout this exchange, John had maintained eye contact with the king, something he now realized no other representative did. He noticed Zarketh's tail twitching slightly, perhaps in annoyance at this small defiance. Earth thanks the council for its consideration, John said finally, bowing just enough to be polite but not submissive. As his platform returned to its position, he heard whispers around him. After the session ended, Elia approached him in the corridor. You handled that well. Most new representatives leave their first encounter with King Zarketh in tears. If their species can cry, is it always like this? John asked. Elia guided him to a quiet alcove where they wouldn't be overheard. The council was created thousands of years ago as a place where all spacefaring species could meet as equals. A beautiful idea. Her silver eyes darkened. But ideals rarely survive when power is involved. The Draconians control critical resources, vital trade routes, and have the largest military fleet in known space. One by one, other powers either joined them or were subjugated. And no one resists? John asked. Those who tried openly were made examples of, she said quietly. The rest adapt. We find small ways to maintain some independence while acknowledging reality, which is that we are all, in effect, vassals to the Draconian Empire. The council exists mostly as a puppet government that creates the illusion of democracy. John absorbed this information, thinking of Earth's own history of empires and resistances, of tyranny and freedom. Later, in the privacy of his quarters, he composed a message to be sent back to Earth through their secure quantum channel. He described what he had observed, the power dynamics at play, and Zarketh's dismissal of their technology request. He ended with a personal observation. The situation here is more complicated than we thought. These people need something they've forgotten how to find. Courage. And perhaps humanity, despite our technological disadvantages, might have something valuable to offer after all. 3 months passed quickly on the council station. John Carter had settled into a routine, attending daily sessions, studying alien cultures, and building relationships with other representatives. His apartment now felt like home, decorated, with a few items from Earth and gifts from his new allies. Tonight he sat in a small corner of the Nebula, a bar popular with council representatives. The lighting was dim, and strange music played softly in the background. Across from him sat Elia, her blue skin glowing faintly in the low light, and beside her was Sam Mitchell, a newly arrived human diplomat. So you're telling me this entire council is basically a show? Sam asked, keeping his voice low. He was younger than John, with red hair and a skeptical expression. Not entirely, Elia replied, stirring her drink with a long finger. Real governance happens. Territories are managed, trade flows. But the important decisions? She glanced around before continuing. Those are made in the Draconian Palace, not our council chambers. John nodded. I've been mapping out their control systems. It's not just military might, though that's significant. They've created dependencies. Dependencies? Sam asked. The Draconians control the key hyperspace lanes, John explained. Most critical medical technologies come from worlds under their direct influence, and the rare minerals needed for advanced computing, 90% come from Draconian territory. Elia added, any civilization that defies them suddenly finds these resources unavailable. Without certain medicines, some species face pandemic disease. Without hyperspace access, economies collapse. Sam let out a low whistle. That's why no one challenges them directly. Some tried, Elia said, her silver eyes darkening. The Arcturus Federation, the Rigelian Compact, even my own people once stood against Zarketh's father. What happened? Sam asked. Official records show the Arcturans suffered a terrible civil war. The Rigelians supposedly destroyed themselves through environmental catastrophe. And the Centauri Alliance? We experienced an unfortunate plague. Her voice was bitter. All convenient natural disasters and internal conflicts that required no draconian intervention. John had been researching these events in the Council archives. The records were clearly edited with gaps and inconsistencies. When he questioned the archivists, they became nervous and evasive. Tomorrow's council session will be interesting, John said, changing the subject. Proxima Parfor is requesting emergency aid. The famine? Sam asked. He had been briefed on current council matters before leaving Earth. Elia nodded sadly. Their main agricultural regions have been devastated by unusual weather patterns. Millions will starve without assistance. Will the council approve aid? Sam asked. John and Elia exchanged knowing looks. Let's just say I wouldn't bet on draconian generosity, John replied. The next day, the three sat together in the council chamber. Representatives from Proxima Fu, thin aliens with gray skin and large eyes, stood on the speaking platform. Their spokesperson described the famine in urgent terms, showing images of withered crops and hungry children. King Zarketh listened from his central position, his scaled face unreadable. When the Proximans finished, he spoke. The council sympathizes with your situation, the king said, his deep voice echoing. However, resource management is a planetary responsibility. Perhaps better agricultural planning would have prevented this crisis. The Proximan representative's voice trembled. Your Majesty, we request only temporary assistance. Our people are dying. Request denied, Zarketh said simply. This council cannot reward poor planetary management with emergency resources that others have planned for properly. It would create unhealthy incentives. John watched the Proximans leave, their shoulders slumped in defeat. He leaned toward Elia. This doesn't make sense. Even from a purely political standpoint, helping them would build goodwill. It's punishment, Elia whispered. 6 months ago, Proxima IV refused to allow draconian military bases on their moons. The unusual weather patterns began shortly after. Weather control technology? John asked, shocked. Officially, such technology doesn't exist, Elia replied. Unofficially. She let the implication hang. That evening, as John and Sam walked back to their quarters, they noticed someone following them. John signaled Sam silently, and they ducked into a service corridor prepared for trouble. The figure that turned the corner was a surprise. An elderly draconian, his once bright scales now dull with age. He moved with difficulty using a walking stick. Ambassador Carter, the old draconian said softly. I am Krell. Once I served in the royal court of Zarketh's father. Now I am retired. His mouth twisted in what might have been a bitter smile. How can we help you? John asked cautiously. Perhaps it is I who can help you, Krell replied. I've observed your behavior in the council. You are different from other new species. You maintain eye contact with the king. You ask questions, others avoid. I'm just trying to understand how things work here, John said. No, Krell said, his yellow eyes sharp. You are looking for weaknesses in the system, and you are right to do so. Sam tensed beside John. What do you want? To share knowledge, Krell said. He glanced around nervously. Not here. Come to my quarters tomorrow. Section 17, Level 5, Room 42. Come separately. Tell no one. After Krell left, Sam looked at John. Could be a trap. Could be, John agreed. But we need information, and he's the first Draconian willing to talk to us. The next evening, they carefully made their way to Krell's quarters. A small, dimly lit room filled with strange artifacts. The old Draconian offered them seats and a bitter-smelling drink, which they politely declined. I was once the royal historian, Krell explained, until I suggested reforms that would restore the ancient Draconian values of honor and fair combat. For this, I was branded a traitor and exiled from our homeworld. What can you tell us about King Zarketh? John asked. He rules through fear, as did his father before him, but Draconian culture respects strength above all. Krell leaned forward. That is why your behavior interests me, human. You show no fear. Earth has had its share of tyrants, John said. We've learned some lessons about standing up to them. Krell nodded slowly. The Council's greatest weakness is that no one has directly challenged the King's authority in generations. The chains that bind the Council are partly physical, partly psychological. His voice dropped to a whisper. Break one, and you might break both. How? Sam asked. We have no military power here. Earth is technologically behind most Council species. Technology and weapons are not the only forms of power, Krell said. Sometimes courage alone can change the course of history. He passed John a small data crystal. These are the ancient laws of Draconian leadership and combat. Study them. Well, as they left, John felt the weight of the crystal in his pocket. I think we just found our first real ally, he said to Sam. An exiled Draconian? Sam shook his head. Not sure if that's lucky or desperate. Both probably, John replied. But he's given us something valuable. Insight into how Draconians think. They respect strength and direct confrontation. So what's our next move? Sam asked. John thought. About Earth's first major trade convoy, scheduled to arrive at the station in 2 days. It carried humanitarian supplies intended for several worlds, including Proxima IV. I think, he said slowly, it's time to test the limits of Council law and Draconian patience. The massive Earth trade convoy arrived at the Council station with little fanfare. 5 ships, small by galactic standards but impressive for humanity's first major space fleet. John Carter stood in the docking bay, watching as the ships connected to the station. The lead vessel, the Liberty, opened its airlock and Captain Linda Hayes stepped out. Ambassador Carter, she said with a crisp salute. Earth sends its regards and a whole lot of supplies. John smiled. Good to see you, Captain. I trust your journey was smooth? Smooth enough, though we had a Draconian patrol scan us 3 times at the outer boundary. She frowned. They seemed very interested in our cargo. I imagine they were, John replied. Let's get your crew settled. Then we need to talk. Later, in John's secure office, he met with Captain Hayes, Sam, and Elia. John activated a small device that created a field that blocked listening devices. The supplies for Proxima IV, John began. Are they ready for immediate delivery? Captain Hayes nodded. Yes, but I heard the Council denied their aid request. They did, John confirmed. Which is why we're going to use Council law against them. He pulled out a data tablet. Section 122, Paragraph 7 of the Council Charter. Independent species may engage in direct trade agreements without Council approval if such trade does not violate established embargoes. Sam leaned forward. And there's no official embargo against Proxima IV. Exactly, John said. The King denied Council aid, but he never prohibited private trade. We'll establish a direct agreement with Proxima IV, outside Council channels. Elia looked concerned. This will anger Zarketh. He intended for Proxima IV to suffer. I'm counting on his anger, John said quietly. It's time to create the first visible crack in his authority. The next day, John filed the necessary paperwork for a direct trade agreement with Proxima IV. By midday, Draconian administrators arrived at the Earth Embassy section. "Ambassador Carter," said the lead administrator, a thin Draconian with green-gray scales. "There seems to be a misunderstanding regarding your trade proposal." "No misunderstanding," John replied pleasantly. "Earth wishes to trade medical supplies and food with Proxima 4. We've filed all required documentation. The Council has already ruled on aid to Proxima 4. "The Council ruled against Council aid," John corrected. "This is a private trade agreement between Earth and Proxima the 4, which falls under Section 122, Paragraph 7. The administrator's tail twitched nervously. "Perhaps you are unfamiliar with our customs. When the king makes his wishes known, I'm very familiar with the laws of the Council," John interrupted, "which the Draconian Empire helped establish and swore to uphold, unless those laws no longer apply." The administrator left, clearly unsettled. 2 hours later, guards arrived at the docking bay where Earth ships were preparing to transfer supplies to Proximan vessels. "By order of station security, these ships are temporarily impounded pending review," announced the guard captain. John was waiting for this. A small crowd had gathered, representatives from various worlds watching the confrontation. He stepped forward with a data tablet. "On what grounds?" he asked loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Security concerns," the guard said vaguely. John nodded and then raised his voice. "I hereby invoke the right of public review under the ancient statutes of the founding worlds." He tapped his tablet, and the text of the law appeared on screens around the bay. "This statute, which predates the modern council and has never been abolished, requires any detention order to be publicly justified before the full council within 1 hour." Whispers spread through the crowd. The guard looked confused, then spoke quietly into his communication device. After a moment, he stepped back. "The ships are released. You may proceed." As the guards retreated, representatives from several worlds approached John. They spoke in hushed tones, asking about direct trade agreements with Earth. By evening, John had scheduled meetings with 12 different species. The news spread quickly through the station. In the council chamber the next day, attendance was unusually high. King Zarketh entered last, his movements stiff with barely controlled rage. "Before we begin today's agenda," the king announced, "I wish to address a matter of protocol. It seems our human friends are unfamiliar with how things work in civilized space." John sat calmly, aware of all eyes on him. "While technically legal, their actions regarding Proxima 4 show a disturbing lack of respect for council decisions," Zarketh continued. "Such behavior from a new species might lead to unfortunate consequences." After the session, a message arrived for John. The king requested his presence for a private audience. Sam and Elia both urged caution. "This could be dangerous," Elia warned. "No one is invited to private audiences unless the king intends to either bribe or threaten them." "Or both," Sam added. "I have to go," John said. "Refusing would show weakness." The royal chambers were opulent beyond imagination. Precious metals and gems decorated every surface. Guards with plasma weapons stood at attention as John was led inside. King Zarketh lounged on a massive throne, his tail swinging slowly back and forth. "Ambassador Carter," the king said, his voice deceptively pleasant, "I wanted to speak with you directly, to ensure there are no misunderstandings between us." "I appreciate the invitation, Your Majesty," John replied, maintaining eye contact. "You have caused quite a stir with your little trade stunt," Zarketh said. "Clever use of our laws, I admit. But you must understand something." He leaned forward. "Laws are tools of convenience for maintaining order. Real power exists beyond them. On Earth, we believe laws protect everyone, even kings," John said. Zarketh laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "A charming notion. Let me be clear. Earth can have a place of privilege in the galaxy. Your species shows potential. But first you must accept the natural order. And that order is? The strong rule, the rest obey." The king's eyes narrowed. "Your choice is simple. Accept my guidance, and Earth will prosper under draconian protection." Resist, and learn why no species challenges us twice. John considered, his words carefully. Humans have long experience with tyrants, Your Majesty. We've learned that giving in to threats only leads to greater demands. The king's tail slammed against the floor. You dare call me a tyrant? I simply observe that true strength does not need to rely on fear, John replied calmly. Earth respectfully declines your offer of protection. Get out, Zarketh hissed. You will regret this decision. As John walked back to his quarters, he knew lines had been drawn. The confrontation he had been preparing for was now inevitable. 3. Days later, the body of a council representative was found dead, an apparent suicide. The next day, another. Both had recently signed trade agreements with Earth. Then came the message from Earth. Unusual solar activity threatened catastrophic flares that could damage Earth's infrastructure and cause massive casualties. The warning was clear. This natural phenomenon could be prevented if Earth reconsidered its position in the Council. Instead of backing down, John called for an emergency council session. As representatives filed in, tension filled the air. Many expected John to announce Earth's surrender to draconian demands. They were wrong. The emergency council session began with tension so thick it seemed to fill the air. Representatives spoke in whispers, casting nervous glances at the draconian section. King Zarketh arrived last, his guards forming a wall behind his central platform, his yellow eyes fixed on John with cold hatred. John stood at Earth's platform with Sam and Elia nearby for support. When the session formally opened, John moved his platform forward. I have called this emergency session to address 2 urgent matters. John began, his voice steady. First, the deaths of Representatives Corlin and Vex, both ruled as suicides despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Murmurs spread through the chamber. John continued. Second, the sudden solar activity threatening Earth, which began immediately after our refusal to bow to draconian demands. King Zarketh's scales darkened with anger. These are serious accusations, Ambassador. Do you have proof to support them? I do, John replied. He activated a display showing communication logs between draconian military vessels and hidden bases near Earth's solar system. Our ships recorded these transmissions. They match exactly with the onset of solar interference. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. John continued. As for the deaths, both representatives had security recordings of their final hours. He played a brief clip showing shadowy figures entering Corlin's quarters shortly before his supposed suicide. These are fabrications. Zarketh roared. Earth attempts to distract from its violations of council tradition. Not tradition, Your Majesty, John replied calmly. Law. The same law that your ancestors helped create, and that your empire claims to uphold. John looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various representatives. For generations, the council has operated in fear. Species that resisted draconian control suffered natural disasters or civil wars that were neither natural nor civil. The king's tail lashed furiously. You overstep, human. I stand for justice, John replied. Then taking a deep breath, he spoke the words he had been preparing for days. By the ancient laws of leadership, I formally challenge King Zarketh's right to rule. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the king seemed frozen in shock. John continued. According to draconian tradition, leadership may be challenged through ritual combat. I invoke this right, as recorded in your own sacred texts. For several moments, no one moved or spoke. Then laughter erupted from the draconian section. King Zarketh's laugh boomed loudest of all. You? Challenge me? The king's voice dripped with mockery. A human, barely 6 feet tall against a draconian king. Your species truly is delusional. John remained calm. Does your majesty refuse the challenge? Would you violate your own sacred traditions out of fear? The laughter stopped instantly. Zarketh's eyes narrowed to slits. I fear nothing, especially not a soft-skinned primate. I accept your challenge. His mouth curved in a cruel smile. "Prepare to die, human. The combat will take place in 3 days." As the session ended, representatives rushed to surround John. Some thought him brave, others called him foolish. Most simply wanted to say goodbye to the human who would surely be dead soon. Back in John's quarters, Sam paced angrily. "This is suicide. The king is twice your size with natural armor and claws." "I know the odds," John replied. "But there was no other way." Elia looked at him strangely. "You anticipated this from the beginning, didn't you? Since you met Krell." John nodded. "The Draconians respect strength and direct confrontation. Their own laws are the one thing they can't simply ignore without losing legitimacy among their own people." "But how will you win?" Sam demanded. "This isn't just about making a statement. If you die, Earth loses its voice here." "I don't necessarily need to win the fight," John said quietly. "I just need to win the moment." For the next 3 days, John trained intensively. Krell visited daily, teaching him draconian fighting techniques and weaknesses not commonly known to outsiders. "The scales at the base of the neck and under the arms are thinner," Krell explained. "A strong blow there causes significant pain. And contrary to appearance, draconian tails are quite sensitive. They use them for balance, so targeting the tail can disrupt their movements." Meanwhile, Elia made a remarkable discovery in the ancient archives. She burst into John's quarters on the second day, her eyes wide with excitement. "I found something," she said, showing him a data tablet. "Ancient records suggest Earth was visited by Draconians thousands of years ago." "What?" John looked at the data in surprise. That would explain myths of dragons in human cultures. "More importantly," Elia continued, "these records indicate that early humans successfully drove them off. Your species is one of the few that ever resisted draconian expansion. This information has been suppressed in official histories." "That explains why they've always seemed unusually hostile to humans," Sam observed. "We hurt their pride before." As the combat date approached, Security Chief Laura Blackwell arrived from Earth's nearest outpost. Tough and experienced, she quickly uncovered a network of the King's agents planning to assassinate John before the fight. "We've neutralized 3 separate threats," she reported the night before the combat. "But there's something else. I've made contact with dissidents within the Draconian hierarchy, including military leaders uncomfortable with Zarketh's rule." "Can they help us?" John asked. Laura shook her head. "Not openly, but they've promised not to interfere if something happens during the combat." The day of combat arrived. The arena, built into the heart of the council station, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Some had traveled days just to witness this unprecedented event. The combat area itself was a circular space 50 feet across, surrounded by energy barriers to protect spectators. John entered from one side, wearing a simple black outfit designed for maximum movement. The crowd murmured at his appearance. He looked small and vulnerable. King Zarketh entered from the opposite side, his massive form covered in ceremonial armor that he removed piece by piece, revealing gleaming black scales beneath. He carried no weapons. His natural claws and strength were weapon enough. "Last chance to beg forgiveness, human," the king called across the arena. "Do so, and I may permit you to live in exile." "I stand for the freedom of all species in the council," John replied loudly enough for all to hear, "including your own, people who deserve better leadership." With a roar of fury, Zarketh charged. The combat had begun. The king's first attacks were terrifyingly fast. John dodged, using his smaller size and greater agility to avoid the deadly claws. He landed a few strikes to the king's sensitive areas as Krell had taught him, but they seemed to only enrage the Draconian further. A sweeping tail caught John off guard, sending him tumbling across the arena floor. Pain exploded through his ribs. At least one was broken. The king followed, moving in for what he clearly thought would be a killing blow. Instead, John rolled and struck upward, hitting a vulnerable spot under the king's arm. Zarketh howled in pain and staggered back. The fight continued, brutal and increasingly bloody. John was clearly outmatched in strength, but his strategy was working. He wasn't fighting to kill. He was fighting to show courage, to demonstrate that the king could be resisted. As the combat entered its 20th minute, with John battered and bleeding but still standing, something unexpected happened. Representatives from 17 species stood up among the spectators and loudly declared their withdrawal from draconian treaties. King Zarketh roared with fury as the 17 representatives made their declaration. His yellow eyes blazed with rage, darting between John and the standing representatives. "Silence," the king bellowed. "This combat is sacred. Political statements are forbidden during ritual." But more representatives stood, 20 now, then 30, each announcing their withdrawal from draconian treaties. The king's plan was unraveling before his eyes. John, despite his injuries, smiled. "This was never about defeating you physically," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "It was about showing everyone that you can be opposed." "Enough," Zarketh snarled. He turned toward his guards at the edge of the arena. "End this farce. Kill the human." The crowd gasped as the draconian guards raised their weapons. This was a shocking violation of the sacred combat rules. Even loyal draconians looked disturbed by the command. The guards moved forward, but then stopped. From among them stepped a tall, heavily decorated draconian military officer. He removed his helmet, revealing distinctive red-gold scales. "No," the officer said clearly. "This combat is protected by sacred law. I will not dishonor our traditions." "General Vorthak," Zarketh hissed, "I order you to kill this human." "You have broken the combat code," Vorthak replied. "By our oldest laws, you have already lost." Other draconian officers removed their helmets, standing with Vorthak. The king looked around wildly, seeing his support crumbling. In his moment of distraction, John made his move. Using the last of his strength, he darted forward and struck a precise blow to the spot where Krell had told him a draconian's balance nerve cluster was located. The king staggered, disoriented. John followed with a sweeping kick that sent Zarketh crashing to the ground. In an instant, John was above him, his knee pressed against the king's throat, a position that, in draconian combat tradition, signified victory without death. "Yield," John said firmly. For a moment, the only sound in the arena was the king's heavy breathing. Then, with hatred in his eyes but recognizing his defeat, Zarketh spoke the ritual words. "I yield to the victor." The crowd erupted in cheers, whistles and other sounds of celebration from hundreds of different species. Medics rushed in to tend to John's injuries as guards led the former king away. General Vorthak approached John and bowed deeply. "Ambassador Carter, you have done what many thought impossible," the general said. "The draconian people have long suffered under Zarketh's dishonor as well. Many of us have waited for this day." 3 weeks later, John stood at the center of the council chamber. His broken bones were healing, though he still moved carefully. The chamber looked different. Now, the seating had been rearranged to form a perfect circle with no platform higher than others. "The Emergency Restructuring Summit will now begin," announced the temporary chairperson, a respected elder from the Arcturus Federation. John looked around at the gathered representatives. The Draconian Empire had fractured following Zarketh's defeat. General Vorthak led a reformist faction that controlled their homeworld, while hardliners loyal to the former king had retreated to fortress worlds at the Empire's edges. "Our first order of business," the chairperson continued, "is to draft a new charter for the Galactic Council, with protections against any single power dominating our proceedings." Over the next 6 days, species after species spoke freely, many for the first time in generations. Earth, despite its relative technological disadvantages, was given a prominent role in the new structure due to humanity's willingness to stand against tyranny. On the final day of the summit, Sam found John staring out a viewport overlooking the massive station. "Quite a view," Sam said, joining him. "Not just the view," John replied. "Look at the ships." He pointed to the docking areas where vessels of all shapes and sizes moved freely, some belonging to species that had been isolated for centuries. New trade routes opening daily, cultural exchanges beginning. This is what the Council was always meant to be. Earth is being called the catalyst, Sam said. The species that changed everything. John shook his head. We didn't free them. They were never truly conquered, just waiting for the right moment, the right example. Later that day, representatives from over 30 worlds requested a private meeting with John. Their spokesperson, a tall being with iridescent skin, revealed something unexpected. What you must understand, Ambassador Carter, is that many of us had been building resistance networks for centuries, she explained. But we lacked the catalyst to unite us. Humanity's defiance provided that spark. What you perceived as submission was often careful, patient preparation for the right moment, added another representative. Elia arrived, carrying a data tablet with her completed research. I found something fascinating, she said. Resistance to oppression is a common thread across all successful spacefaring civilizations, but methods differ. She showed them the data. While humans confront threats directly, other species developed subtler approaches based on their evolutionary histories. The Arcturans preserved knowledge through encrypted art. The Centauri created seemingly harmless social networks that were actually resistance cells. Each species now brings their unique strengths to the Reformed Council, Sam observed. 1 month after the combat, a small ceremony was held to install the new council leadership, a rotating body of 12 representatives from different regions of the galaxy. John had been offered a position but had declined, preferring to remain Earth's ambassador. After the ceremony, he and Sam stood at a viewport overlooking the stars. I received new orders from Earth, John said. They're sending ships to help secure the new trade routes, and they're asking about establishing human colonies on some of the newly opened worlds. Humanity stepping onto the galactic stage for real, Sam remarked. We weren't special because we stood up to a tyrant, John reflected. We were special because we reminded everyone else they could stand too. In the following months, the changes spread throughout the galaxy. The Council station became a true center of cooperation and exchange. Former draconian vassal worlds declared independence, while the draconian homeworld itself began a difficult transition to more representative government under General Vorthak's leadership. 1 year after the historic combat, John visited a school on a distant world where children of various species sat together in a classroom. Their teacher, a young draconian with unusual blue-green scales, was discussing recent history. And so we learn that freedom, once realized, spreads faster than any empire ever could, the teacher was saying. The Great Liberation began with a single act of courage that inspired countless others. A small child with tentacles instead of arms raised one appendage. Teacher, was the human very strong to defeat the king? The teacher smiled. Physical strength wasn't what mattered. Sometimes the greatest strength is simply the courage to stand up when everyone else is kneeling. As John watched from the doorway, he felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This, not the combat, not the political restructuring, was the real victory. A new generation growing up without fear, learning to value courage and cooperation over domination. The galaxy was changing, one mind at a time, and humanity was proud to be part of that change.